All right, we are all set. We are streaming live on YouTube, and an archive of the webinar series will be available to our participants after the event. Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, it's 1 o'clock. My name is Martin Daly. I'm the Director of Water Quality Programs for the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. I want to welcome everybody for joining us for this session. I do want to give a shameless plug for CDRPC. We are a regional planning commission serving the counties of Albany, Schenectady, Saratoga, and Rensselaer County, fostering regional dialogues on issues beyond municipal borders. So when we're talking about economic development or youth justice or water quality programs, we're involved in a lot of those discussions. I do want to momentarily also give a plug for one of our programs that is currently open for applicants. That is our technical assistance program. If I can get my screen to share, I can be able to describe this in much better detail. We do partner with what we call our sister agency, the Capital District Transportation Committee, and we work with local municipalities on a variety of programs, including land use planning and implementation, project development, data analysis, trends and mapping related to transportation issues. So we may look at a particular transportation corridor and do kind of a deep dive into some of the impacts that that corridor has for a community and ways that that corridor could perhaps be reimagined, taking input from local residents, from any involved agencies, and being able to prescribe some recommendations for that community to make sure that corridor works, not only for transportation purposes, but for the community as well. So I do want to share that opportunity. People can go to our website to find more about that program. I do want to remind our participants that they do join muted and with video for context purposes, for security purposes, but we by all means would like to encourage you to give us some feedback, to participate in the discussion we're going to have today. To do so, you can use the chat function or the Q&A function. I'll work very much in the same vein as your favorite radio host, and I will interject periodically to our presenters to pass along your question to those of you who are joining us. So please feel free to interact with us, submit your questions and comments. Another frequently asked question we get is, what about certifications? 24 hours after the close of the webinar, we do distribute an automatic email to each of our participants. You may take that email and submit it to your local municipality for consideration of credits. Municipalities have a wide latitude in accepting programs for credits. And so this one is right at the alley of the 4 hours of training required for planning and zoning board members each year. If you do not receive email or you have questions about receiving communications from our prior sessions, just reach out to me, Martin Daly at CDRPC. You can email me at cdrpc@cdrpc.org or contact me through our website, and I'll be certain to get back in touch with you. All right, now that the preliminary, I call it the dog and pony show, is out of the way, you're here to talk about today's particular session, which is adapting planning board procedures for the digital age. I'm really excited to have Helen Budrock, a senior planner with Delaware Engineering, with us, and Jim Carnell, who is the director, Department of Building, Planning and Zoning for the town of Thompson, New York, joining us live and in person. And I am so excited they're going to be bringing this presentation for us because I am a Board of Zoning Appeals member. We have, since COVID, transitioned to a digital enterprise to host our meetings. So I'm eager to find out what other communities are engaged in, some of the best practices from around the state, and how communities are on the cutting edge for delivering public participation in their planning and zoning board meetings. So I'm really excited that Helen and Jim are here, and I will turn it over to them to launch the presentation. So thank you. I realized I had my screen share on that whole time. So thank you for joining us.
Well, good afternoon, everyone.
All right, I'm just going to go ahead and share and project my screen. Just let me know if that works for you.
It does, and we do have a poll, so I'm ready whenever you are to launch that thing. So.
Okay, yeah, I just in a way of a quick introduction. My name is Helen Budrock, Delaware Engineering. We serve as the consulting planner for the town of Thompson, and Jim here is the director of planning, zoning, and building department. And so we want to get a sense of the audience before we kind of got started. So we have a couple of quick poll questions just to get a sense of who you are and how you've been using technology. So Martin, I guess take it away. Do people need to do them one at a time, or they do it all at once and submit?
I believe they can, the poll is open. So people have the opportunity to answer. We have 3 quick questions, very easy questions. The best answer that describes yourself as being a planning or zoning board member, elected official or other, how you're conducting your meetings and how you're distributing materials. And I see that responses are coming in. Oh, it's so exciting. It's like a telethon. For those of you who remember, telethon calls are coming in. So we can see those responses come in. Can you guys see them? Well,
No,
I need
I
to
don't
share
think
my screen. Okay, no problem. I can drag those over, and we can actually, I can share my screen. You guys will have to reshare yours. But give me a moment, and we can. There we go. Can you guys see them?
Hold on a second. No,
Yeah.
I see a building. I see your desktop, I think.
You see my desktop. Well, that's not right. Let me do a new share. It should be doing screen too. Maybe. Oh, maybe. I see the technical difficulty we're having. Zoom will not let me share Zoom's screen. I can share. Maybe if you click on polls at the bottom, you'll be able to see the results like I can if you are an administrator. What I can tell you is I'll just report the results like this is like ABC News reporting election results. So 54% of our respondents reported that they were planning and zoning board members. 18%, which was 5 of our 28 participants, reported they were consultant planner engineers. 30% responded other. So they're joining us today from a different capacity. For currently conducting their municipal meetings, we have 12 of the 29 for 40% reporting in person only. So still doing in person. Digital was 21%, digital only. And then hybrid was the leader in that, close second in that category, in person and digital at 38% for community meetings.
Okay.
And then for receiving materials, hard copy only was 10%, digital only 17%, and hard copy and digital, the mix, the vast majority, clear winner in this case, and they ring in at 73%. So the majority of folks joining us, planning and zoning board members, tied between in-person only and hybrid for the majority of meetings being conducted. And then how they receive the material, a variety of, or the combination of hard copy and digital is our winner in that category.
Excellent, thank you. That helps give a little bit of context. So I'll start off again just with some quick introductions. Delaware Engineering, I know we've done these before. We are an engineering firm that specializes in water and wastewater infrastructure, but we do have a small but dedicated planning team. And we do provide municipal planning services as consulting town planners. So even though our main office is located in the Capital District, I'm actually in Sullivan County in the southern part of the Catskills in the Monticello office. And I serve as town planner for both the town of Thompson and the neighboring town of Fallsburg. So Jim, do you want to give a quick introduction as to the town of Thompson and what it's all about?
Yeah, so as the slide shows, we are the largest township in the county with about 15,000 people. And if anybody's familiar with the area, we do have a huge increase in population for our summer season. A lot of transient people, residential mostly. And there is the Village of Monticello within our county seat. They do have their own form of government. And we have several small hamlets. And so, yeah, our building department is quite busy. We usually, the last few years, have been doing about 600 building permits and roughly the same amount, close to 500 violations a year. And our planning board does meet twice a month with a work session, usually in the middle of the month with the consultants and staff, and normally have a very busy schedule. Other than a few meetings a month, you know, we're probably averaging somewhere around 7 on the low end to as many as 13, 14, or 15 items on agenda per meeting. So it's quite busy here.
Great, thank you, Jim. So I think like a lot of communities, 2020 saw a huge shift, right? With COVID, everybody had to pivot to sort of all digital, meetings, Zoom. Before that, it was kind of, unheard of. And we started streamlining planning board procedures in the beginning of 2021. So I think the town had 6-9 months, under their belt with COVID and doing hybrid meetings, but at the same time, there was a need to streamline how the planning board operated. Things like a lot of municipalities, things have been done a certain way for years, just because that's the way they were always done, and it wasn't always the most efficient way of doing it. So I'm going to have Jim address some of the background in terms of the impetus behind approaching Delaware. At that point, we had been town planner for, I guess, about a year, a little more than a year. And the building department approached us for some additional assistance in streamlining the planning board procedures and basically making the planning board operate a little bit more efficiently. So Jim, do you want to talk about what prompted that?
Yeah, so we've since 2010, between the building, planning and zoning, we have been using a software program, to track and issue permits, and also planning and zoning board projects. But it's, as a software proprietary to us, it was a little restrictive. And we were still dealing with a lot of paper products coming into the town. And we have a 5-member board, and then an attorney and consultants. So, applicants were submitting, 10, 12, 13 copies, prior to kind of coming into this whole COVID scenario that everybody got involved in, obviously. And then with buildings being restricted for occupancy and time, space, and everything else, we really try to transfer into that digital only submission. And we can get into it a little bit further. We're going to demonstrate, creating this Google Drive was really, one of the things that made it really easy. We didn't have to physically mail plans to our board members, planning and zoning board members, and or have them physically come in and pick up a packet. So we were able to email all the information, and ultimately with the drive, just give them, access to it. We'll demonstrate later how it's up on our website, and not just for our board members and staff, but also applicants and the general public. It became just an easy way to access and provide information for everybody.
So in a nutshell, we basically did 4 things. The first thing that we did was we streamlined the planning board procedures. So how applications are accepted, how they get to the planning board, how they're reviewed, how the consultants sort of interact with the planning board. And I'll get to that in a minute and dive into it in a little bit of detail one at a time. The second thing that we did was we updated the forms and applications. They were old, some of them I think might have been done on a typewriter and, just copied over time. So they were definitely outdated. They needed some streamlining. The other thing that we did, as Jim mentioned, is we switched to all digital files with cloud storage in an effort to reduce paperwork, save space. That was sort of in combination with some renovations here at Town Hall when space was becoming an issue. And then last but not least, we adopted a hybrid in-person and Zoom meeting format to make the COVID transition easier, but to also improve public transparency. So that in a nutshell is what we did. And I'll go through them sort of one at a time. So with the planning board procedures, it helps to understand how things were done before so that you can understand the sort of the new process. And the way it worked before is the town had a consulting engineer that had been the town engineer for
20 plus
years. So he was used to doing things a certain way. And that way he was the gatekeeper basically to all things planning board. So applications would come in, the planning board secretary would then set up work sessions with the town engineer, and you had to have a work session with the town engineer before you got on the planning board agenda. So that's what was called the meeting before the meeting. That was one thing that the town felt like the planning board should be the first point of contact for a project, not a consultant. So the planning board should be the one that's determining whether or not a project requires review and input from the town engineer. Because if it's a simple 2-lot subdivision or a lot line change or, or something else, there's no reason to go through that extra step. And it was also causing some delays. I think that was part of the impetus behind it, was also to streamline the procedures so that projects could get through the planning board review process as expeditiously as possible while still conducting a thorough review. So that was one of the first things that we did, was we eliminated the meeting before the meeting. The planning board was the first point of contact, which means that Jim's staff then took on the responsibility when the applications materials came in of deciding whether or not they were complete and whether or not they were ready to be put on the agenda. That was done by the town engineer sort of in the past. So that was a little bit of a transition. I talked about initial plan review being conducted by the planning board rather than consultants. The other thing is we modified the agenda format to improve transparency and meeting efficiency. I think most planning boards usually have the standard format of public hearings, right? Old business, new business, accepting minutes in the beginning. So what we decided to do in terms of transparency is we had several large controversial projects, sort of over the years, that when the public sees that XYZ project is on the agenda, they marshal the forces, bring out the pitchforks and the torches, because they think just because it's on the agenda, the planning board is somehow going to act on it that, very night, and they have to, marshal the forces. So we adjusted the planning board agenda so that public hearings were first, like usual. But then first were discussion items and then were action items. So it would be clear to the public that a particular item was on the agenda just for discussion. No action was going to be taken on it that evening, so that there was sort of a level of comfort and understanding. And then if it was on the action agenda item, it would specifically include a note as to what the action was. So it was lead agency for seeker review. It was scheduling a public hearing. It was referring it for 239 review. It could be final site plan approval, but at least the public was aware of exactly what that item was on the agenda for, and whether or not there was an anticipation that some action would be required on the part of the board. So that was kind of a game changer. The graphic that we did, basically kind of explains the process where the planning board meets twice a week. So the week prior, the application materials come in, the Wednesday prior to the meeting, staff reviews it the next day. By Friday, the agendas are prepared, the files are uploaded to the Google Drive. The planning board then, meets on those Wednesdays, and based on what is on the agenda and the complexity of the project, they then decide whether or not a work session with the town's consultant team is required, or if they just want a technical memo from the town engineer, the town planner, the traffic consultant, whatever the case may be. So again, the planning board is taking more of a leadership role and not, I don't want to say using the town professional consultants as a crutch, right? They just kind of were there at the meeting saying, yeah, well, what do you guys think? So now they're taking on a little bit more of a leadership role, and we're just providing our input when specifically requested on specific projects. So I don't know, Jim, do you want to add anything about that?
Well, just to, expand a little bit. And the reason was, again, I think that sometimes these projects would, go through several phases or, multiple work sessions with, the engineer or consultants, and it would morph several times before it actually got to the planning board and, for them to see it. And by utilizing this process, now the board can see what the applicant prepares and brings in, and and then the board can steer the direction of how they want to see the development go, or and again engage the consultants as to and to what extent do we need to have a full-on traffic review or a traffic study done, or a noise study, depending on the project, and instead of letting all those things happen in the background before they really get involved in the plan review. They're right there from the onset. So, and which again will lead probably into one of the next slides that we talk about.
Yep, and
Yeah,
I should have mentioned, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to mention, I can't stress enough, that works on both sides of the equation. Oftentimes, planning and zoning boards are beat up either by the applicant for taking too long or being ambiguous in what they're asking for, or the public in reviewing applications or going through the application and not having all the details or seemingly making decisions without all the details. The process that you're describing in some municipalities have started implementing is, a pre-meeting, or in Albany's case, we do a workshop where we'll go through an application, what's missing, what needs to be strengthened before it ever goes for official review. And that way the public knows everything that's going to be a part of the component. The applicant has a good understanding of what answers the board is looking for. So it's not public hearing after public hearing after public hearing. Everything is laid out on the table and there's a clear understanding of what the expectations are. So you're absolutely right. This helps on both sides, the public review and to streamline the application process for the applicant.
And the other thing that we did is we actually did a double-sided handout that had this diagram, and also on the back in narrative form, it explained for applicants what the process was. What's 239 review, when is a public hearing, required, what happens if money, needs to be put in escrow, those kinds of things. Obviously, larger projects, they know the deal, right? It doesn't have to explain it to them. But sometimes if you get a smaller project, like a liquor store or a mom and pop, you got to walk them through the process. They don't know what 239, review is, or any of the seeker. They don't know what seeker is. So yeah.
Smaller residential projects, where, somebody's coming in for just maybe an oversized, residential garage, or, they have a home occupation and they just don't know the process.
Right. So I can send you a copy of that if you think it would be helpful for distributing afterwards as sort of an example. So
yeah, we can add a link to
questions?
that, or put a PDF on our website in the materials that we'll post on the Eventbrite page.
Sounds good. So any questions in the chat box on the procedures before I move on to the next slide?
Nope, not yet, but good opportunity to remind folks you can use the chat box or the Q&A and post your questions. We'll make sure to get to them.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, the other thing that we did is we worked with the department staff to streamline the forms and applications. A lot of times there was information on the forms that were either not needed, or there's information that we could have recorded that wasn't listed on the forms. The subdivision, it's a combined subdivision site plan application. It was 6 pages. You can see it's, sort of an older Times New Roman, type format, spaced out. There's an owner's proxy and a checklist and everything else that was basically streamlined so that we cut it down from 6 pages to 3 pages just by kind of rearranging the layout. One of the other things that we did was we did update the application checklist, which again, I can send you a copy of the application, because the old one, everything was just kind of mushed together, and it wasn't clear what was required for a site plan application versus a subdivision application. So it was confusing for the applicant, which items, sort of related to their particular project. It seems trivial, but the town of Thompson actually spent a lot of time and money developing a new logo, that is carried across the welcome signs, the website, all the collateral material. So we also wanted to update all of the applications and the things that went out to the public so that they incorporated that same, format and look, the colors and the fonts and all the rest of that kind of stuff. The other thing I think that was a game changer is, again, the applications were available in paper format. You could download them from the website, the old applications, but they weren't form fillable. So ultimately, we would end up with a handwritten application that was inevitably kind of hard to read, and then staff would have to scan it, into a PDF. So we made the application form a form fillable PDF so that it's one step. The applicant fills it out, sort of digitally, emails it to the building department, and it's much more efficient that way, and it's clearer. And then finally, the other thing that we did was we created a new form for internal purposes, which we called the project overview form, because we wanted something that we could use as a tracking tool for the planning board and staff on different projects. and also as sort of a cheat sheet, or I used the word crib sheet the other day and nobody knew what I was talking about, but it's essentially a crib sheet for the planning board. It has all the information that they need to know about the project, as well as some notes from staff, so they can scan it really quickly before the meeting and sort of, be prepared for the discussion at hand without having to kind of do a lot of research and background stuff on their own.
Well, and when you see it,
Mhm.
it'll again, mostly created for the board members themselves and staff, but again, it's part of the package when you go to the Google Drive, so the applicant can see it, the public can see
Someone
it,
can see it. Mhm.
and it gives, we can input notes and stuff in here so that we know the last time the project was here. And sometimes there's sometimes a long time span between meetings. There's some things, they maybe again, you're getting a traffic consultant involved and you're not moving forward with other review because it's 2 months to get the traffic consultant, or timing, or other, whatever the scenario presents. It could be a couple of months or a couple of weeks before they come back. And when you go back utilizing this form, we know exactly the last time that they were at the meeting, what was discussed. You can go back to the minutes and say, oh, that's a little bit more detail.
Right.
You don't have to search on our website, wondering the last time they were there, or
Mhm.
back through the old handwritten.
Back to the
The
minutes.
old days was the
Mhm.
handwritten minutes, and so now you can just click and go back and see and
Mhm.
read what was discussed. And again, it's a great tool, not just for the
Mhm.
board. I think it's really helpful for the applicant. They know what what the board is expecting the next step to be, and what they should be bringing to the next meeting
Right.
based off of this also.
Right. The ball is in sort of whose court. So I know, Martin, you talked about being on the ZBA. I'm sure planning board and ZBA members can relate. How many times you have something come before the planning board and you're like, did we do seeker on this? Did we have a public hearing? Did we do truth in review? Did we get comments back from the county? I can't remember. It's been 6 months. So that was really the driving force behind this, was to have a document where we had everything in one place and we'd be able to more efficiently track where it is in the review process. So I know it's probably a little bit hard to read on the screen, but I will share a PDF copy, of the form. But essentially, it's the basic information. The applicant, the address, the SBL. There's a little bit of a space for you to do a summary of what the project is, what zoning designation, what zone it's in, how many acres, use type, is it permitted, is it a special permit use? And then the approvals that are being requested, which is just sort of a checklist, right? Is it sketch plan? Is it site plan? Is it, lot line, special permit? And obviously, there's more than one that could be checked off here. Site utilities and access. This has been really helpful for, I think, town staff, particularly the water and sewer department, is they'll look at these forms and say, oh, okay, this project just came in and they are expecting to hook up to the, to the water or the sewer system. So, this is something that I can keep track of. And then access, private, state, county, town. We do that so that we know whether or not it needs to go to the county for a 239 review or to the DOT. Third-party approvals needed. This is really helpful in the seeker process to determine whether or not it requires coordinated review. So other than the planning board, what other approvals are required? Is it Department of Health, DEC, Army Corps for wetlands? In our case, we're in the Delaware River Basin Commission. So, and then there's a space for, putting in other approvals on a case-by-case basis. Then there's a space here for tracking public hearings and referrals. Does it require a public hearing? You check off the box. When was it noticed? When did you get the, the notification receipts back? When was the hearing opened and closed? County 239 referral, if it's required, the box is checked, and then it records when it was sent, if the response, came back. And the same thing with ZBA referral. And then we have a box here for record of appearances. So it's almost like a little timeline of when they first appeared, and then each meeting appearance and sort of what the purpose was, so that it makes it easier to cross-reference if you want more details, to go back to the meeting minutes to say, oh, okay, they, we're here on such and such a, a day, and we talked about traffic, so I can go back and look at them. And then there's a spot for notes and comments, which is kind of like that crib sheet, cheat sheet for the planning board. The second page of the project overview form really is a tracking mechanism for seeker and also for the consultants. So here is where we capture, did the planning board request a comment letter from the town engineer, the planner, legal counsel, other consultant like a traffic or noise consultant, and was it received? Were there work sessions held outside of the planning board meeting and when? So again, you can cross-reference notes. We don't use this a lot, but we thought it would be helpful to track the escrow. So when was it established and how much? I mean, that's more of an internal administrative function for the building department, but it was helpful to put it on there. Then we have a section on seeker. So first is the classification. Is it type 1, type 2, or unlisted? When they submitted the EAF, which needs to be submitted with the site plan or subdivision application, did they give us a long form without appendices, or sometimes for a large project, even if it's a type 1 action under seeker, they'll submit a long form EAF with addendums like traffic studies and SWIP, and that kind of thing.
So this document, it appears like a living document because as you go through the process, they'll check things off. Is this something that's periodically updated by staff and then re-uploaded to a website, or how do they communicate the genesis?
It is a living, breathing document that lives on the Google Drive in the folder for that particular project. And I'll actually do a demo a little bit later on, and I have one that's built out. So this form before every meeting is updated. So every item that's on the agenda for an upcoming meeting, I'll go in, I'll update the project overview form, or I'll create a new one if it's for the first time. And then that way we can track. And when I'm preparing for the planning board meeting, I'll see, oh, okay, the last time they were here, they were supposed to give us a traffic study. And now they've given us a traffic study and the consultant has reviewed it. So I'll put that in the notes. So it's sort of a living, breathing tracking document that's constantly being updated. Again, not to go through the details on seeker, but this tracks the seeker process basically from submission to the EAF all the way through lead agency designation and then negative deck. We don't have a lot of pause decks that result in an EIS. We have one big project now, but if it is a large project, then there's a space to track, all of the seeker, benchmarks for an EIS as well. And then last but not least, at the end of the process, the actual vote is recorded, the approval, not specific names, but, if it was approved with conditions, then they're sort of listed at the bottom. And again, it's a crib sheet. It's not going to have all the detail that's in the conditional site plan resolution, but it'll have enough that if we need to go back, we'll remember, oh, okay, that was one of the big conditions was they take down that, that ugly, building on the corner or whatever it was. So I'll give you sort of a quick preview. This is an example of a project that we had recently. It was an Aldi supermarket. So again, you can see little description here. They're seeking site plan approval for a 20,000 square foot grocery store. It's in the HC2 zone. It was private water, but public sewer. They needed DEC approval for the SWIP. We had our public hearing. It went through 239 referral. It came back as local determination. And here's a little bit of a chronology of the meetings and discussions. So the application was first submitted in August of 2021, and they got their final approval in March of 2022. So, I mean, I think we were kind of proud of the way it went through. I think in other communities, something like this, which we would consider to be a somewhat large commercial project in our neck of the woods, might have taken longer, but we were proud of the kind of the efficiency of the review and getting them from initial submission to approval in, roughly 6 or 7 months. Not too bad, right? A little more than that.
Yeah, and this particular one, the developer was trying to develop the project with direct access from a state road, which was just not a feasible. They're trying to use a right of way through an existing Taco Bell with turn lanes on a state road, directly, like in the turn lanes from a signaled intersection. That was, I think, the biggest sticking point.
Yeah, the biggest holdup was the access.
That probably delayed. I want to say delayed the project, but it was probably almost a 2 to 3 month
Working that out.
working that out, and then, ultimately the developer, we got an alternate location for them to come in from a town road, but still have visibility and accessibility from the state road.
And you'll see down here, one of the conditions of the approval that was recorded, it refers to the official, approval resolution, but that any potential future access from the state highway would require planning board approval. So the main access is from a secondary road. In their plans, they had some alternate scenarios for access from New York State Route 42, but they didn't have those easements in place.
Yeah.
So one of the big conditions was that if they decide to put in those other secondary accesses, that they would have to go back to the planning board for a site plan amendment. So that is essentially the project overview form in a nutshell. Any questions from the chat box, Martin, or anything?
I'm going to turn mute off. No questions. So
Sounds good. So we'll
zeroed
move
in,
on
so
to
dialed in. So
so we'll move on to step 3, which was the transition from paper to digital. And I'm going to take you through a little kind of a demo of the Google Drive and what it looks like and sort of how it works. But as an overview, what we ended up doing is, number one, we created a Google Drive for file storage and sharing. I want to emphasize that it was free. You can pay for additional cloud storage, but essentially all we did was create a generic planningthompson@gmail.com. So we created sort of a generic Gmail address for the planning board. The account was set up through the town's, sort of official email address.
Yeah.
But so we had to set up a Google account. But we created a generic planningthompson@gmail.com address to be used for kind of a generic communication to all the planning board members. We purchased, the town purchased Microsoft Surface Pro tablets and configured them with the email. So the Outlook on the tablet was configured directly to the Planning Thompson Gmail. So all they had to do was open the email and any communication would be there. On the desktop on the tablet were shortcuts to the Google Drive, shortcuts to the Thompson's E-code, sort of on the web, and some other resources. And what we ended up doing was, on the staff end of things, once the Google Drive was set up and we had folders for all the different projects that were before the planning board, Jim's staff would actually create hyperlinks on the agenda directly to the corresponding file on the Google folder. So we didn't have to send, 20 million emails to the planning board saying, okay, here's the agenda and here are the plans for XYZ. Here are the plans for this. I think a lot of planning boards end up sending information to the planning board members just attached to an email. And I know the first year that I was doing the planning board stuff, it's like, I'm going through my emails and I know I got something and where did it end up and did I save it? So this makes it easier because it's all in one place. All you have to do is just click on the item on the agenda and it takes you to the folder on the Google Drive. So
one thing I did want to add, with the digital age, and some of the laws and restrictions for, retaining records. So now we have redundancy with our servers here. We have remote servers and we have 2 cloud backup storage locations. So we meet whatever obligation that we would have to fulfill for, it's not general services, the state office for records retention. So
State Archives and Records Administration.
yeah, state archives.
Yeah. So, but when you set it up, you just want to make sure that however you do it, you have that redundancy. So, so you don't get in trouble with not keeping paper copies, because that, when you have, I think there's 3 different formats that they say that's a permanent record now as an electronic record. You don't have to keep the actual hard copy.
Right. That's a good point. So just really quickly, I'll go through the rest of this quickly, but the way the Google Drive is set up is there's a series of folders. This is sort of the hierarchy from an administrative standpoint. So the planning board and the public only see the projects that are in the active projects folder. But from an administrative standpoint, the way it is set up for us is that there are active projects, those projects that are actively under planning board review, archived projects. There's a folder for forms and applications, just general items, meeting agendas, meeting minutes, resources, and then Zoom meeting recordings. So I'm going to go actually to the next slide, which is an example of what the tablet looks like. And you'll see here, this was sort of an early test email that came from me to the planningthompson@gmail.com address. The only thing that's attached to the email is the planning board agenda with the hyperlinks to the folders. And basically it's simple for the planning board. Here's the agenda. Here's the Zoom link. And you can access all the files from the agenda. So if I click on that, I'm going to take you to the town website. And Martin, just let me know if it's still sharing appropriately. Are you seeing the town website, or are you still seeing my presentation?
Yeah, I see your presentation, so you may want to go to a different screen.
Okay.
If you, yeah, if you click
Yep.
share, you may be able to view a different screen.
Yep. Hold on. How does that look?
Now I can see it. Yep.
Okay, excellent. So this is the town website, not, unlike a lot of municipal
Well, it's
websites.
a page on our website.
It's a
not-
page.
It's not the opening,
I
but
apologize.
it's the hyperlink to the agendas and meetings.
It's the hyperlink to the agendas and meeting minutes portion of the website, which is right here. So if you click on that, you come to this screen, and you'll see typical, right? Planning board, zoning board, town board, agendas. You'll notice that the only meetings that have a meeting packet is actually the town board, which are still in the dark ages as far as we're concerned. But the ZBA and the planning board have both gone all digital. So if you're a member of the public and you want to see what's going on, all you have to do is click on the agenda and you can access all the material that would have been in the quote unquote physical packet. So I'm going to scroll down to the planning board meeting from March 23rd, which is when all these got approved. And I'll show you what the agenda looks like. So you'll see, again, the format that we talked about. There was one public hearing, there was 2 discussion items, a couple of action items, including Aldi's, which was on the schedule for conditional site plan approval. So if you were a member of the planning board or a member of the public, all you would have to do is click on Aldi's. And I'm assuming you're still seeing my screen in terms of the internet, right?
Yeah, I can see the folder tree. Yep.
Folder tree. Okay, excellent. So when you click on the Aldi's folder, this is a typical format. When an application first comes in, the actual application folder will be set up. There's a separate folder for the 239 referral process, the initial request, any responses back, consultant reviews, if there were any technical comment memos that were requested from the town's consultants, plan sets. So in this case, there was 4 different plan sets as we kind of evolved, throughout the project. Public hearing. There was the public hearing presentation. It has the legal notice, the sort of proof that the notices were mailed. Seeker. So in this folder, you basically have the original environmental assessment form, the EIF parts 2 and 3 once they were completed, and a copy of the neg deck resolution. And technical reports are for things like traffic studies or other like the SWIP, things that need to kind of live on their own. But you'll see the project overview form is top level. So essentially, as soon as you open up this folder from the agenda, if you just want, a snapshot of what this project is all about, you pull it up and you can basically see, what the project is, their history with the planning board, and you can see, staff's comments in terms of where the project is, what the comments at the public hearing were, the concerns that the planning board had, and basically where it is in the
There's the
review
DOT
process. Yep.
concerns with the access, as part of the notes there.
Yep. So it's memorialized, and then it sort of stays with the project as well. So what's great is that we're now getting to a point where a year plus into this process, and now we have applications that have been approved and now are coming back for site plan amendments. So now, again, we have that history where we can keep that overview form going and say, okay, it was approved on such and such a date. And, 9 months later, they came back for a site plan amendment, and that was, approved, and the notes kind of go with it. So,
Right, they were well into the one particular project was well into the construction phase, and, realized that something that was on paper was not necessarily going to work for them. It happened to be an auto auction facility, and they needed to amend the site plan. So we just bring them back and we do an amendment on the site plan and update, as Helen said, update the form.
So that is the main sort of switch from the paper to digital was the Google Drive and the project overview form. Are there any questions or comments before I move on to the last task that we did?
Nope, not yet, but I did put a reminder in the chat. So folks, if you do have questions, please use the Q&A or chat functions and submit them, and I'll be sure to interject and ask.
Okay, sounds good. So the last thing that we did, again, I don't think this is necessarily revolutionary because everybody has sort of had, to do this, but the town, like a lot of municipalities, had to sort of pivot to this, hybrid live Zoom meeting format, which actually kind of improves, I think, the transparency and the public participation. But the town in the courtroom that is where the planning board meetings are held, they installed two large screen smart TVs in the meeting room. They purchased a Meeting Owl Pro. Do you use the Owl, Martin?
We do not use an owl for the for Albany Board of Zoning Appeals meetings because everyone is remote. But we do use them for the CDRPC board meetings, and I think they work pretty well. So folks who are joining remotely get a good perspective of who's at the meeting.
Yeah. So if anybody doesn't know what an owl is, or you don't have an owl and you want to do hybrid meetings, just like leave right now and go buy one because it is like the best thing. And sliced bread. So it's an all-in-one. It's the mic, it's the speaker, it's the camera, all-in-one device. You just put it in the middle of the table. It sort of it follows the speaker. Plus you've got the panorama view on top, so you can get kind of a bird's eye view of the room. I would buy stock.
Yeah. So
you guys are using it right now also in your presentation. I can see the room and you folks sitting.
Correct. So, for us, we had a particular challenge because the town board, planning board, zoning board also utilized the space of the courtroom. So with it being the courtroom, we have, limitations with audio and visual being, utilized in that space. So the Owl happened to work really good because it's a portable device. We can take it to any conference room, in the building. Typically, we have smaller conference rooms, but again, with the volume of the applications and review that we're doing for the planning, we really need to utilize the larger space. There's a tremendous amount of features that I don't want to sell the product, but it does come with transcription, a feature on it. It has it records audio separate from video. So there's a lot of different features and I'm not sure which model, there are probably several different models, but it is a great device especially if you don't have something that's already set up with audio and video. It's a fairly
plug and play, right?
Yeah, it's a fairly inexpensive way to really, expand the features that you can provide for the board members and for the public too.
So this is basically what the public sees at the planning board meetings. The applicants are on one side of the table. This is me over here. Jim is on the other side of the table, so they can get a panorama. But when the applicant's speaking, they can see the applicant, especially if they're holding up plans or whatever. The other thing that I'm doing here on the side is as presentations are being made, I'm sharing plans and other material from the Google Drive on Zoom. So, a lot of hybrid meetings, you have somebody in a room with a plan on an easel. And if you're a member of the public, you're like, what is that? I can't see. So I'm sharing the plans so that they can see exactly what the planning board is reviewing. And the other thing that had to be done was just some minor things like upgrading the modem, the Wi-Fi to make sure that it could handle sort of the volume of folks that were attending via Zoom, because we've had some controversial projects. So that's really just kind of a recap of what we did. I don't think any of it was kind of revolutionary, but it's been a game changer, I think, in terms of improving efficiency of the review process. So, we just wanted to close by sharing some lessons learned, and then we'll take any questions that folks have.
And I did want to interject before you get to lessons learned, I guess. How are you finding obtaining remote comments or sharing comments that have been submitted to the town through email or letters? How are you experiencing that opportunity to gather public input on the projects?
Well, like I said, we've had some rather controversial projects where we've been inundated with emails and letters. We have one large warehouse project similar to like an Amazon distribution that has been very controversial. I think what's been easier is that I can show it to you, but this particular project, we have a folder for correspondence. And anytime the planning board secretary gets an email or a letter, she scans it or she saves it in that folder. So the public can see not only that their comment has been received or their letter, but they can also see who else has submitted letters, and the applicant can see that too. I mean, that's something that I'll get to, is that it's not just transparency for the public, it's also transparency for the applicant, because they will use that as an opportunity to say, okay, we got all these letters from folks complaining about traffic or whatever it is. We'll make sure that we come to the meeting prepared to address, this specific concern that showed up in the letter. So again, it makes things, I think, more efficient, because everybody understands what the issues are and can address them in, sort of as quick a fashion as possible. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Jim.
Yeah. It's just, again, it's within the project folder. It's the public hearing and correspondence. It's just again, label things as you need them. You create the folder and identify it as the way you need them, or whatever. And that's the nice thing about the Google Drive is, again, it's free. It's somewhat limitless. It's not like you're trying to utilize somebody else's software or hardware, to and make your stuff fit. It's pretty flexible.
Right. And I should have said before that the public obviously just has access as a read only, right? So they can't do any manipulation within the Google Drive. I mean, obviously Jim
Good.
and I has that capability, but
the applicant has promised candy for everyone for life. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We learned that the hard way, and that I forget what it was early on in the process when the staff did the sharing link. They, instead of doing it as read only, they did it as edit, and it was a controversial project. And I think somebody ended up deleting the folder, thinking that the project would just go away if the folder was
the dog ate my homework. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Right. So we corrected that pretty quick. It was part of the learning curve, but in any event.
And I had said to Helen early on before we started this today, everybody probably felt some growing pains with whatever video format that they were utilizing, and security settings, other types of things, not letting people, unmute themselves and start their video without, without some filters, and, the Zoom bombers, as they were
every
called.
Meeting's an adventure.
Exactly.
That presented its own challenges, but, for the most part, I think, we've been able to, get past it, overall. You still have some exceptions, but and again, everybody's going to have to deal with that. One of the things that I also mentioned, the governor has been extending this expanded use of the electronic formats, to I forget what the exact date is now, but it's sometime this month, the 17th possibly.
They just keep renewing it.
And there's talk, hopefully to make it more of a permanent type of, scenario so that municipalities can utilize the format. I mean, again, coming into the digital age is without, growing pains, but But here's some of our lessons.
I mean, Jim touched on it. Sometimes the transition to new technology is difficult for some, easy for others. So even though we set up that generic Gmail address, the planning board members, for the most part, still prefer that we send the agenda, to their individual email address like they're used to. So there's some redundancy built in there, but they don't want to check another email. They just want to, check their regular email once. Technology can sometimes be scary. I think a lot of people picked up on it pretty quickly, even Jim here. We are not dinosaurs, we're both in our 50s, but we're not exactly like born with a smartphone in our hands. So, a lot of this was a little bit of a transition. We did have some older members of the planning board that, found it difficult to transition, to the new technology, but ultimately they kind of became comfortable with it. The other thing I wanted to talk about is that what sounds good on paper doesn't always work in practice. We're a little bit over a year into this sort of streamlined process. I think eliminating the meetings before the meetings and some of the things that we've instituted have worked really well. But one of the things that I'm still on the fence on is the meeting agenda, the discussion versus action. And part of it is that I think you need to be flexible. Like sometimes someone will come in as a discussion item and they'll need a 239 referral, or they'll need lead agency, or to just schedule a public hearing. And our town attorney is pretty strict in that if it's on as a discussion item, the planning board takes no action. In my mind, it's better to be a little bit more flexible. It's not like final approval, right? So if something happens and something changes and you just need to do a referral or some ministerial action, there's no reason to make them come back 2 weeks just for that, sort of thing. But that's something that we haven't had a chance to really talk with the planning board about, as to whether or not that is something that they want to change, or if they want to stick with the format, or have some sort of a disclaimer on the agenda that says, discussion items may, have limited actions.
Yeah, limited actions such as, establishing a date for public hearing or something, not where they're actually going to be making a decision, but more of an administrative type of action where, you do need to do the 239 referral or
declare lead agency, and
you want to engage your consultant for whatever purposes, whether it's sound, traffic, hydrologist for, a project that, we don't have a lot of municipal water services through our, township. So a lot of the projects end up, dealing with on-site wells and dealing with a hydrologist. So, you right from the get-go, you might want to engage your hydrologist with their hydrologist to make sure that, they're going in the same direction, and they don't prepare a whole report that just needs to get completely, dissected and start again, right from the beginning.
So we're adapting that. We'll see if we can make that process a little bit more flexible so it doesn't slow down the review process. The other thing that we found out is there is such a thing as too much information. We tend to put everything, that comes in related to a project on the Google Drive. That certainly saves time and money. But I think what Jim has found is that the planning board secretary before, right, it was once a week, right? Applicants would come in all on Wednesday with their big packets, and she would have to kind of deal with it kind of all at once. And now the information comes in dribs and drabs, right? There's an email here, an email there, got to save this to the Google Drive, that kind of thing. So it's more efficient, but it is also seems to be over a longer period of time, if that makes sense, right, Jim?
Yeah, and and again, trying to go back to keeping it more organized. We're just, at some point, sometimes you just got to ask the applicant, listen, Wednesday's the deadline. Don't send me 5 emails. Get everything together as a package, and then it just makes it a whole lot easier for them to get the information available for the board members, because again, sometimes a board member may look at the project, and not see 2 days later that something else came in, So we try to make sure that they have by that deadline, which is the week before the meeting, and try to keep it again as a package as much as possible.
And the deadline of the week before the is to get on the agenda. We've had cases where they're on the agenda and then literally, like that morning of the meeting, we get a letter from DOT with comments on the traffic impact study. So, it's not like you have to then rush to sort of, send critical pieces of correspondence to the planning board so that they have it before the meeting. It's kind of updated in real time, if that, makes sense. So there's pluses and minuses.
It's also good practice to make sure they're in a week ahead of time, so they're added to the public record for the opportunity to, for that record for the applicant or members of the public to review.
Yep, absolutely. And
which is the last thing there is. It's really cut down on the amount of FOIA requests, because again, 1 or 2 big projects that have a lot of public input, we could get 20 FOIA requests for the same information, and copying it, and with this format, it's available to them. They have the information just as everybody else does at their fingertips. And sometimes, it's the reporter that's covering the story, or, they can have the information prior to the meeting.
Absolutely.
So that when it's been discussed, and they want to do an article or something on something that was before the board or did receive approval, or, initial application, so that they have accurate information when it gets put into the public.
We've had a lot of projects where the reporters have actually taken either renderings or other visuals from the Google Drive and kind of put that as the lead for their story instead of trying to, but it ends up in reporting is more accurate, especially with these controversial projects. And then, the last thing is, this was surprising for me because we did the project overview form as a tracking tool for staff and for the planning board. But I'm finding that the applicants are using it too. There's one particular applicant that every time he's, on the agenda, he'll check my project overview form and look at my notes, and then he'll call me up and, be like, well, I see you had this question. Here's the answer. So, or they'll come to the meeting prepared to, kind of address whatever is in the comment section, which again, I think is good. It makes it a little bit more. Otherwise, it's almost like the applicant can read your mind now, right? So in any event, that's all we have. So I don't know if that was helpful. Again, I don't know if any of this is revolutionary. I mean, it's been a game changer for the town, but I'm sure others are doing, things, very similar. So.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of our attendees are in various stages of transitioning to managing, hosting things digitally, digital hybrid meetings. There's different ways that folks are complying with the rules and regulations and juggling the operational challenges that are presented. So I really appreciate your sharing the materials and the presentation and your wisdom as far as things are working out in the town.
Apologize for the background music. They're mowing the lawn outside here.
I didn't even hear it.
So, well, that's the one thing that the owl is good at. It actually, it will filter out some of the background noise.
Yeah.
So I just did want to touch base too, and I think if I get the acronym correctly, I think it's ARPA money that comes from the state that because of the COVID and, a lot of towns and municipalities struggling with, a number of different, it really doesn't have like limits on what you can spend the money on. And that's one of the things that's really helped the town, really do all this stuff. I mean, the tablets for the individual board members, they take it home. I know some municipalities, Fallsburg, which again is an adjoining town, they actually keep the tablets. All the information is put into the tablet for the board members, and then they bring it to the meeting and have it. I kind of like the way it's available to them anytime that they need to look at it. They want to sit at their house and, have their dinner or have their ice cream at night. They can, go through the project and get prepared before the meeting, so it's.
We did get a question. How long did that I'll say digital transition, but streamlining the application, the forms, setting up the Google Drive, structuring your meetings, how long would you say from the old school, we have our Wednesday night meeting at the meeting room and people show up at 6 o'clock and they have their time with the microphone, to what you're doing now?
I think it was 2 or 3 months.
About 2 or 3 months. I mean,
yeah.
it was
quick turnaround. Okay.
Because of the COVID, it was kind of quick, again, not just for the planning board, but for the town board and, and the zoning board, obviously too. But yeah, the forms, we were already kind of in the process of upgrading all of our older kind of typed forms. And even though they may have been scanned to a PDF, we're really making them a workable, fillable, product, so if you go to the town's website, I believe all of the departments, the town clerk, the assessor's office, water, sewer, the building department, all of our forms now are all fillable PDFs. We have links to the 911 for addresses and, other types of things too. But it was good for us because, I don't want to say good, but it was a little bit easier for us because simultaneously before COVID, we engaged with a firm to upgrade our website. And, so it's easy for us to in-house put stuff up there. So I'm not sure, how a lot of other municipalities are doing it, but yeah, we have maybe 4 or 5 staff, 6 staff people that can actually, just access it. We have links to, a Facebook page, so same thing when we have a meeting with a public hearing, we'll also, have our planning secretary just, throw the thing out onto our, Facebook page too, just so that it's, the public is informed. And so that was a big, I think, it made it easy for us to get there because of, getting the information out.
And if folks are interested, you can go on the Town of Thompson website. There's actually a sort of like a blog section, and there's 2 articles in there. One is about the streamlining the planning board process, and the other was for the public. Was called like How Things Get Built in Thompson. Those are really good examples for other municipalities that could do outreach to explain to the general public how the planning board review
How
process,
the process works. Yeah. There seems to be some disconnect in a lot of communities that we've worked with about how things move through the process and what's in the jurisdictional wheelhouse of each of the independent agencies reviewing something. We had 2 more questions, and I want to end there because we're over time. But I do want to get to these 2 that were posted. So if folks have additional questions, feel free to reach out to our presenters through their contact information, or reach out to me and I'll pass them along. The 2 final questions: do you get a sense of how much labor time has been saved by transitioning to the online management and meeting system? And the second question is, do current employees shepherd the project, or did a consultant help with updating forms, setting up the Google Drive, and updating the procedures?
You want to address the first one anecdotally? How much of a time saver has it been?
It's tough to quantify, honestly, because we do, going back, we have a lot of information that comes in now. But what I will say is it does save time from our board members, either physically driving here, picking up a packet, and, sometimes, the biggest thing and most municipalities are faced with is the records retention. We're not dealing with, an applicant bringing in 10, 12, to 13 copies, of site plans. And some of them on a larger project, can be, 20, 30. I mean, we just,
versions,
a couple of years ago, we had, the casino come in, the Resorts World Casino come in and, they build roadways into it, and they built, lighting districts, and all these things were all part of the planning process, and, just the volume of paperwork is really the big asset, I think, on this. I mean, we simultaneously, before COVID hit, the town jointly applied with the county of Sullivan for a records retention grant specifically for planning and zoning, because we literally, as most municipalities, our desks were being overcome by filing cabinets. I mean, literally, we had to result to, purchasing a storage container and putting it into our parking lot for court records and documents, and running temporary heat and everything else out there because they have to be conditioned space. And fortunately, we were the recipient of that, and now we have a large scale scanner and platter that we just scan the documents in. And again, having that redundancy with this grant at the county, because they also have servers, remote servers, and 2 cloud-based storage. So the county has a four backup system, and so does the town have 4 places to back up the information. And again, time savings and convenience and is one thing, but again, the long term, saving the time and space and record retention is huge. We're ultimately, I think we eliminated around 23 filing cabinets, in the planning department, and just numerous, in our record retention room, I couldn't even, a 16 by 20 rack of files that, we can eliminate, and just not have to have it, at the meetings. And, the convenience of having the smart TVs, not just for the people that are in attendance at the meeting, but obviously the electronic, people coming in, electronically, they see what the board members see. You can expand it. You can, again, as they come in those PDFs, you
can
want to
zoom
blow
in.
it, you want to blow it up 100%, 200%, 400%. You can, and then, you can see, how far, something is from a property line. You can see the well, you can see those types of things in great detail. So,
And I think as far as the division of labor goes, it's really split between myself and the planning board secretary. So she's the first point of contact. As stuff comes in, she will upload it to the Google Drive into the appropriate folder. And then she will actually do the agenda. She'll do the file sharing and add the hyperlinks and kind of distribute that. And then once we get the final agenda on the Friday before the meeting, usually it's Monday, Tuesday that I am updating and creating project overview forms. So she does all the front end stuff, and then I basically do the project, overview forms. And I think it ends up being maybe 4 hours a month, I think, typically, and again, you're meeting twice a month. So it might take me a couple hours to go through and update and create, but it really doesn't take that long. And it saves time in the long run,
Yeah, to that second question, it sounds like the town did rely on Delaware to be the consultant to help set some of these things up and administratively take on roles.
Absolutely, they were key in getting the format done. Yeah.
Yep.
Great.
That was a separate contract that we just did on an hourly basis, so it wasn't.
Okay.
So
Well, that does it for our questions. And if folks have additional questions, they can certainly reach out to me or our presenters. I do want to thank Jim and Helen for joining us this afternoon. Delaware has been super generous to be not only a program presenter, but also a sponsor of a webinar series. So I do want to convey that I really appreciate their support, because we really couldn't do it without our sponsors and our speakers. So thanks for wearing both those hats and helping to underwrite the series and bring it to people for the low cost we're able to offer it. Before I do sign out, I will do one final screen share for folks that are local to the Capital District. We do have our technical assistance program, and we are seeking applications. I actually see one that just came into my email just moments ago. So if folks are interested in participating in this program or finding out more, reach out to us or the Capital District Transportation Committee. We'd love to work with local communities and find ways that they can improve delivery of services and address some transportation issues they may have in their communities. Again, we have, I'm going to stop my share here, figure out how to do it. Again, the automatic emails to certify attendance will go out 24 hours from the close of the webinar. So check your inboxes after the conclusion of this effort. So that'll be tomorrow on 2:15. You'll get your automatic email. And we hope you can come back and continue to join us. Check out the Eventbrite page for the next series of webinars in the series. So with that, thank you to our presenters. Thank you for everyone who joined us this afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you on Friday at 1 o'clock for our next session.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.